Hey, glad you can join us for another Contending for the Nation podcast. Better buckle up for this one. We're going to go searching for RINOs. You'd think RINOs are, in other countries, but I tell you, we have an abundance of RINOs scattered all over this country. Out in D.C., in Wyoming, in Park County, right in our town, Cody. I mean, man, they're all over. I didn't realize we had so many RINOs. And I tell you what, Bible tells us very clearly in 1 Thessalonians 5:12, we're to know those who labor amongst us.
As darkness permeates our nation, seeking to erase our godly heritage, we resist the lies and censorship, and we passionately pursue truth and the one who said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. You're watching Contending for the Nation with Mark Anderson.
I will do everything I can to ensure that the former president never again gets anywhere near the Oval Office. We have seen the danger that he continues to provoke with his language. We have seen his lack of commitment and dedication to the Constitution. And I think it's very important that we make sure whomever we elect is somebody who will be faithful to the Constitution.
Last question.
Many of us have probably been very disappointed with many of the Republicans we helped put in office, especially here in Wyoming. Wyoming's supposedly a very red state that votes for those with R's behind their name. And the recent 2020 election has really shown the true colors of where these Republican candidates stand for. One of those at the top of that list is Liz Cheney. She doesn't represent the state of Wyoming. She lives in Virginia, spends very little time here in our state. In fact, there's times I've written to some of our politicians, our senators, and then also our representative Liz Cheney, and never hear back from her, never hear a thing. Nothing. Crickets. She has a $7 million war chest right now to help her get reelected. I mean, where does all that money come from? $7 million from Wyoming? No, we're going to look into where does her support come from. I think it's very important. Lately, she's been telling and asking Democrats here in our state to cross over on the August 16th primary and vote for her. And then after the primary, they can go back to voting Democrat. But she's giving them instruction how to cross over on the primary, vote for her, and then switch back to being a Democrat. My daughter graduated with her master's from Azusa Pacific out in California, and we went out there to celebrate and be part of that ceremony. So we flew into Palm Springs and stayed close to Palm Springs. When we were heading back home, we were returning our rental car, and the manager and the owner of this rental car agency drove us back to the airport. And he says, "What's your Liz Cheney doing here in Palm Springs?" Fundraising amongst all the people in Palm Springs. Palm Springs is known as a homosexual capital, very liberal policies, but yet she's down there raising support amongst these liberals to defeat Harriet Hagman or whoever's running against her in the state of Wyoming. House Minority Kevin McCarthy recently helped her do a fundraiser, helped organize this fundraiser for her in Jackson, Wyoming. We're going to talk about some of the people that were at that fundraising event. Some of her supporters are people like Senator Mitt Romney from the state of Utah, a big-time Trump hater, recently gave $10,000 for her election campaign. Why don't you stay tuned and listen to David Iverson of Wyoming State Politics. And we're going to put the link to his full broadcast, but he exposes her Soros-connected fundraising groups and where she's getting most of her money. stay tuned and listen to what David has to share.
Vladimir Lenin once said, "Show me who your friends are, and I'll show you who you are." Who would have thought that his prophetic words would aptly describe the political environment that we are living in? Contrary to what the media tells you, the vast majority of political money that is spent in American campaigns comes from the radical left. One group alone, called Arevella Advisors, spent $1.2 billion just by themselves to get Joe Biden installed in the White House. Several times on this program, I have told you about different radical leftist groups that are operating within the state of Wyoming. Those are the usual suspects: labor unions, the Center for American Progress, and the Tides Foundation. And when you take a look at it, it usually boils down to a very small, very rich, and very powerful group of people, many of whom are tied into industry leaders. So, for example, during the special legislative session this past October, every single legislator that voted against having it or did not turn in a ballot received campaign money from either Pfizer, the Wyoming Medical PAC, or the Wyoming Education Association. And honestly, that's just the money that we know about that was reported to the Secretary of State's office. So really, it's not that big of a stretch to see the correlation between agenda-driven campaign donations and the resulting votes of legislators. The difference between those campaign donations and what we're going to talk about today is Pfizer, the Wyoming Medical PAC, and the Wyoming Education Association did their business out in broad daylight. Before I get going, I think it's important to tell you why I call Liz Cheney crickets. She hasn't spoke to Wyoming Republicans in over 450 days. She's hardly ever on the campaign trail in the state, and when she does show up, she charges constituents to see her. That's exactly what she did for her little shindig down in Jackson, which I have to tell you, that one is going to play a starring role in today's episode. But it makes you wonder, who is she talking to? She's not talking to Wyoming citizens, so she has to be talking to somebody else. And given all the press she's received recently about her $7 million war chest, People for the American Way is a left-of-center advocacy group formed in 1981 by liberal Hollywood television producer Norman Lear to oppose the conservative principles espoused by Christian conservative televangelists. People for the American Way monitors what it characterizes as, air quotes here, right-wing activities, advocates for left-of-center policy agendas, and helps to elect liberal political candidates. People for the American Way's policies include left-of-center positions on a wide range of issues, including public funding of abortion providers, a path to citizenship for illegal immigrants, tax and spend big government budgeting, and a general opposition to President Donald Trump's policies and appointments. And guess who's on the advisory board for American Promise? Former Wyoming Senator Alan Simpson. Oh, just love him. And he's really concerned about dark money, even though he sits on the board of a group that's funded by dark money. But, pay no attention to that. For the last 2 weeks, the mainstream Wyoming media has been publishing articles about all of this campaign money that Liz Cheney is raising. But nobody really asks the question as to who is giving it to her, aside from saying, well, there's a lot of Democrats that are donating to her campaign. But the real question is, which Democrats? Who exactly is giving Liz Cheney money? Let's go back to what double-talking Democrat, former Senator Alan Simpson, had to say.
You don't know what phantom background they have, and who is the money behind them, because there certainly isn't a guy giving $5 from Gillette.
Nope, she didn't get $7 million from single private individuals giving $5 and $10 and $20 donations. Not at all. Her donors have a lot deeper pockets. Now remember exactly what she said after she was removed as Republican conference chair.
I will do everything I can to ensure that the former president never again gets anywhere near the Oval Office.
So what does everything include? I would say that it includes taking money from whomever will give it to her so she can build up a war chest, regardless of who those people are that are writing the checks. To research any politician's fundraising, go to the website opensecrets.org. You can type in their name or the name of their PAC, and you can pretty much trace down where that money comes from. In Liz Cheney's case, There's a long and distinguished list. Before we go on, let's remind ourselves of whose fundraising we're discussing.
Look, I'm a Republican. Well, not all Republican. I pause because I've been kicked out of some party organizations, but I'm a Republican.
Yeah, now you know why they were laughing so hard.
Harriet Hageman is the Trump-endorsed candidate running against Liz Cheney. Liz Cheney's counting on a couple things for her to get reelected. Harriet's leading by a long shot right now, so Liz is dependent on these two things. One, that Christians and conservatives stay divided. They vote for another candidate other than Harriet, and that gives her a good chance. And then also she's counting on crossover voting. On August 16th, she's counting on Democrats switching their party affiliation for one day, voting for Liz, and then going back to being Democrat. And I want you to listen in Harriet's words what most people in Wyoming feel about Liz Cheney and what's going on in Washington, D.C.
I am going to reclaim Wyoming's lone congressional seat from that Virginian who currently holds it. I have driven over 23,000 miles around Wyoming since I announced that I was running for Congress, and there has been one overriding theme that I have heard over and over and over again, and that is, we're fed up. We're fed up with the Democrats who want to destroy our country and take away our God-given rights as guaranteed to us by our Constitution. We're fed up with the January 6th Commission and those people who think that they can gaslight us. We're fed up with those types of Republicans who work harder to deflect attention from the failures of the current administration than they work to protect us from it. And we're fed up with Liz Cheney.
All right, we're here in Cody, Wyoming. This is our hometown, and we need to, the Bible talks about know those who labor amongst us. We need to know our candidates. One thing I feel like is Christians and conservatives many times don't know the candidates that are running, and they just vote for somebody because they're nice, don't know about their policy. I'm here with one of our local candidates, Nina Weber. She's running in House District 24. But I think one of the things we're seeing in these conservative states like Wyoming and Utah is they're targeting these states to flip them from, they got to flip them from red to make them purple, and then with the goal of turning them blue. And we're talking on the subject of RINOs. It's such a danger to our country and to our freedoms and to our value. And just like it's so important that we know the candidates and what they stand for. If we don't stand for something, we fall for anything.
Mark, you bring up a really good point. I know here in Cody, some of the most important positions start at the local level. And we're talking about all of the boards that are like the non-glamour boards, like the landfill board, library board.
Dog catcher.
Yeah. And the reason it's important that these people, we pay attention to all of these local boards is because you never know what aspirations somebody might have. And they could be
That's
nice.
good.
They
Good
could be
point.
nice people, but you don't know if they're nice people and they want to make a difference and they want to get on these boards. But what you don't know what happens next is, do we believe the same things? I don't know that. You don't know that till you start working with somebody and maybe the board direction is, okay, well, we just have this certain project and we're trying to do that.
Right.
But if this person gets into an elected position, they are going to affect taxes, property rights, individual rights, education, a whole bunch of other situations that either A, we don't want to pay for, or we don't buy into, or it doesn't fit our Christian values.
Yeah, that's very good. Well, let me ask you this. A little bit about your background, if you could share. And then why are you running for this seat, House District 24, here in Cody?
So the reason I got into this race is I really feel that Park County is being misrepresented and underrepresented. We have a current rep in there who does not want to show up to meetings, is not being responsive to the people in our district, and who goes down to Cheyenne and votes a certain way that goes against conservative Republican values, and then comes back here to Park County and says, "Oh, I got you covered." And when, yeah.
There's too much of that going on.
Yeah, or I've heard this quite a bit from my opponent, which is, well, there was a lot more to the bill than that, and you wouldn't understand that. And I don't think it's fair to talk down to people. I mean, we're talking about people who we're affecting their pocketbook and their freedoms.
Yeah.
And right now, Cody, Wyoming, Park County, Wyoming, and Wyoming in general, and our whole country is at a turning point.
It is.
And we're at a turning point with something that you just said earlier when you opened up with turning purple. Wyoming is a conservative state. But when you look at websites like American Conservative Union, they show us as a purple state, not a conservative state.
Yeah.
And that bothers me.
And this is the thing is in the general election, like for president, you look at 3/4 of this state will vote for a Republican president like Donald Trump.
Yes.
But yet the legislative body and some of the politicians that we're sending to D.C., they don't have our values.
So when you bring up the Wyoming legislature, I mean, we have a lot of strong candidates that are in position now. Many are running for re-election today, and some are not. On the House of Representatives, every rep is up for re-election. So they're running today for their spot. And some important things about that is that a rep runs every 2 years. So, it's a daunting task. So it's also when you're looking at voting records and how to vet your candidate or say, wow, does he or she really believe the same way I do?
Yeah.
I mean, we have a couple of websites that we can check all of the voting records out. When I came up with this chart, there was a couple of other things that I wanted to be pretty clear about that would make
and
this
there's
difference.
this is on your website, right?
It's on my website.
So we'll put this a link at the bottom of the page for you to check out.
Yeah, ninaweber.com.
Okay.
Yeah. So a couple of the things that are really different, and the voting records speak for themselves, right? So I don't have a voting record, but my opponent does. So the voting record speaks for itself, and my opponent is rated very low on a
I
lot
noticed
of the
on some of
websites.
these charts, like Wyoming RINOs,
Okay.
very important. We're going to put that link at the bottom page. She's at 30%. And I can say Sandy Newsom. I don't mind saying that. And she's got an F grade. In fact, almost all of these conservative charts, she's got an F grade everywhere as far as there's not conservative values. She doesn't share our values.
So there's 3 big sites in the state of Wyoming that grade legislators based off of Republican values, based off of conservative values. It's WyoRhino.com, and my opponent does have a low grade on that, and that's a failing grade. WyoRhino they pick out 10 conservative bills, and they rate if you're in favor of them or you're not in favor of them. Okay, so obviously the last year's voting, my opponent did not vote so well, meaning she voted with the liberals or a different agenda than conservative. The next website is Evidence-Based Wyoming. They use a little different site. They take every vote that you have and compare it with everybody else, the most conservative Republican to the most liberal, or I guess it'd be a Democrat. And then you're weighed that way. So it takes every vote into consideration. And the next website, what's the other one we have? wyovote.com. Wyovote.com does the same thing. So the thing that doesn't change on all three of these websites is that the people that are strong conservatives and have the values of the Republican Party and Christian values, they're at the top third of the rating. That doesn't ever change. If you're voting liberal or leftist or moderate or redcoats or rhino, you're voting that way, you're going to be in the bottom half always.
Yeah. And this podcast goes to other states as well. I would highly recommend anybody, if you really care for your state, looking into some websites like this for your state as well. You told me about that one website.
Oh yes, I did.
And it's for the whole country, right?
And
I was really impressed.
Yeah.
Can you tell the audience about that one?
So this is a really great website. It's American Conservative Union, and it goes by each state, and they rate the lifetime of the legislature, whether you're a Senate or a rep, and they go into your voting and your voting history. And they do it on the state level and they do it on the Congress level. So on the state level, we have 60 members in the House of Representatives. And again, the top getting conservatives on ACU, which are the top third of whether it's Rhino, whether it's Vote, or whether it's Evidence-Based Wyoming, those people are still on the very top level. But they go into American Conservative Union, gives you the bill number, gives you a description in conservative terms that everybody can understand, and how the person voted. And if those values are in line with conservative values. And also, ACU is the one who gives out the CPAC awards.
Okay.
And, so
we'll put that link at the bottom of the page. Check that one out.
Yeah.
I think it'll be good. A couple more things before we finish up. You mentioned to me, and I think a lot of people are unaware of this, in an election year when somebody's up for re-election, their voting really changes a lot, doesn't it?
It does.
Tell us a little bit about that.
So Mark and I were just looking at a couple of these websites, and you could clearly see that my opponent in a non-election year is at 30% at best. But during an election year, she can jump that up to 45% or 50%. And it does make a difference. This is a game that is constantly played
in politics.
It's played in politics. And it's politics, folks. I mean, you have to just say, I'm going to do my research and figure out who these people are.
You're working on an initiative you shared with me about that. Let's close with that. Tell us a little bit about that.
Okay. So my group is working with a statewide initiative. And we're working on the initiative to stop crossover voting. And the reason we're doing this, Mark, is because, crossover voting is huge here in our state. And it has
Liz
affected...
Cheney is counting on crossover voting to get reelected. And she's telling Democrats how they can switch their party affiliation on the day of the primary, vote for her, and then go back to being a Democrat.
It's unbelievable that a representative who had some respect in our state has now turned out to be, very tricky in what her goal is.
Yeah.
Her goal isn't to be conservative, and it isn't to be a Republican, and nor does she care. I mean, so this initiative goes along with what we have tried to get our legislators to do on the state, on the House side and the Senate side, which is to stop crossover voting. So the initiative does state that as of May 1st of an election year, you will not be able to change your party affiliation until after the primary election day.
Right.
If the current legislative branch cannot pass a crossover bill, meaning to stop crossover voting, then we the people will do it. And that's how it'll get done, and it'll still get on the ballot.
That's wonderful. It needs to be done.
It needs to be done.
Well, Nina, it's been great visiting with you about this, and it's so crucial, this upcoming election, because especially in our state, it's like we're on the verge of going from purple to blue if we don't deal with some of these issues. A lot of candidates know in our conservative state, if you run with a D behind your name, you're not going to get voted in. But if you have an R behind your name, A lot of trickery, a lot of deception, and a lot of candidates getting in there that don't have Republican values. Subscribe to our podcast on Rumble. That's the main place to catch us. You can also catch us on markandersonministries.com, Truth Social. You can catch us on Facebook, also on Telegram. We'll be uploading to some different platforms as well, and we'll keep you posted on those. But share with others. In some closing thoughts, you know, if we really care for this country, we have to do our part. Get involved in prayer. Know those like we shared today. Know those who labor amongst us. You know, the establishment does not want us to vote in true conservatives, patriots, people who are, people that are not power hungry. They want to keep the RINOs going. Mitch McConnell's doing everything he can to stop and to get the establishment RINOs voted into power, both in the House and the Senate and all over this country. And then if you look at Mitch McConnell, I mean, so many times the Democrats, they've been backed up against the wall, the Biden administration, with these $1 trillion spending packages. And it looks like it's going to be defeated. It's not going to happen. And then Mitch McConnell, our Senator John Barrasso, and others feed him a lifeline. And now look at the inflation. In 40 years, this is the highest rate of inflation. Things are out of hand. And a lot of these RINOs are responsible for our government right now and what's going on in D.C. and across our country, the high gas prices, the food chain shortages, so much that's going on. They could have taken a strong stand, but no, they've been weak and feckless. Republicans, like I said, they've showed their true colors, especially right after the 2020 election. I remember, right after the election, millions and millions of people were just really concerned about why did the election stop in the middle of the night? What's going on here? This is strange. And they knew something was up. And I would say most of the country believes there's been a huge amount of election fraud and that Donald Trump truly did win this election. I mean, you've got people like Mike Lindell over at Frank's Speech that has a lot of the evidence of what happened to the voting. Dinesh D'Souza's recent documentary, one of the probably the highest rated documentaries in recent years, 2,000 Mules. Check it out, how with geo-tracking they were able to show how the ballot boxes were stuffed in the middle of the night and millions of votes for Biden. And so we need to stand against this stuff. You know, I remember the Republican National Committee, headed up by Ronna McDaniels, who is a niece of Mitt Romney's, and using President Trump's name, they raised millions and millions of dollars to stand against just election fraud. And I remember even sending some support myself. But you know what happened to that money? Follow the money. None of it got used to deal with election fraud. They said, nothing to see here. Biden won. And this is what most of these RINOs have done. They know the truth of what's gone on in this nation, but they're not people of integrity. Many of them are either cowardly or they've been compromised. Look at our Senator John Barrasso. Since Biden took office, if you look at his voting record, he's gone from somewhat conservative to he's in the RINO category of voting for liberal policies and helping helping the Biden administration. It's not a good thing. I hope you enjoyed today's podcast. Like I say, share it with others. The main place you'll find us on is Rumble, and we look forward to being with you in another week with another podcast, Contending for the Nation. God bless you.
In the words of Edmund Burke, the only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. We must contend for truth. If we don't contend for truth, we lose our freedom. Benjamin Franklin said those who would give up essential liberty to purchase a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety. You've been watching Contending for the Nation with Mark Anderson. If you've enjoyed this podcast, share it with others and spread the truth. For more information about today's show and contending for freedom, go to markandersonministries.com and find the truth.